Cool. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is the October meeting of the ACES Committee of Manhattan Community Board 4. We are going to have a short agenda, but potentially a very long second item tonight. We'll kick off with an open session. So anyone who would like can speak for 2 minutes about anything you would like to share with the board and this committee and its membership. And then we have our committee discussion of Manhattan Community Board 4's Statement of District Needs and Budget Requests, where, like we do every year, we will talk through what are the items that we want to prioritize requesting across the areas that we have jurisdiction for. And then we also have new business and anticipate there could be 1 or 2 items that come up there. Alan and I will do what we can to keep things moving. And just as a friendly reminder, we are meeting virtually via Zoom by permission from a ongoing emergency order from Albany. So we can kick things off with the open session. If there's anyone on the committee or anyone, looks like we have 1 person in attendance from the public who would like to speak for 2 minutes, please let us know by raising your hand, which you can do on Zoom in the bottom of your screen, usually right where it says raise hand. Going once, going twice. Agenda item number 2. All right. So Alan and I had a chance to sync up on how we wanted to approach this. We thought that the efficient way to do it would be to have each subgroup report out. We have seen from some of the subgroups lists that are force ranked. And so maybe it makes sense to start there as opposed to going in order of the letters. But before we talk through as a whole group across all the things that we'd like to request, how do we want to order them? I think it would be healthy to get a list of what are all the things we should be considering from each of the subgroups. Alan, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think let's start with that and then we'll pick up as we go along.
I know that for some folks, even though you may have had exposure to community board budgeting, you haven't done it necessarily with Manhattan Community Board 4, you haven't done it with this committee. Any questions before we kick things off?
Can I just, sorry, I wanted to give a space if anybody had a question, but I just wanted to make sure folks understood, again, just in case we don't, you guys will be voting on something tonight that because of due to some unfortunate timing of a lot of different schedules, will be having to be sent directly to the budget task force for tomorrow's night's meeting. So I understand there might be some outstanding pieces of information, uncertainties about certain things, agencies' responses might never be what we want them to be, but we really do need to vote tonight, and we sort of have to have a priority list for the budget task force. And fortunately, you have a handful of folks on this committee that are on the budget task force, most importantly, Leslie, who is the chair of the budget task force. So she can back me up to know that we really do need a list by tonight.
Okay. We'll have it for it, don't worry.
All right. Blake, if you don't mind being put on the spot, you had a pretty both thorough and concise list of items. Do you want to just voice over that? And we can use that as a jumping off point for street life.
Yeah, for sure. So for the street life items, we separated it out into the items that were requested last year and funded, and those that were not funded and new requests. So I'll just walk through the not funded and the new requests. For the ones that we had requested last year, I'll just do it in order of priority from last year. And we can decide if the new requests merit being put ahead of any of these existing requests. So the first item was an increase in funding for sanitation enforcement, in particular the sanitation police. The headcount for that is down by 13, according to the DSNY Borough Consult. So still, likely to be an ongoing need. The second item is increasing the frequency of residential trash pickups in problem areas.
Might be me, but it looks like you're frozen, Blake.
Is that better?
That is better, but I think we lost the last 30 to 45
Okay.
seconds of what you were saying.
Yeah, the second item was increasing the frequency of residential trash pickups in problem areas. The third is reinstating universal curbside organics collection, which had been reinstated in a couple of Manhattan community board districts and in Queens, but not, obviously in ours. The next item is increasing funding for the DSNY Environmental Police Unit, which is responsible for syringe pickup. I think, I'm not sure we ever got a response on that question that came up in speaking with DSNY, but I think that would still be an open need for this year. Next was restoring funding for curbside e-waste collection, which I believe was restored only in Staten Island. And then the new items were increase in funding for rat inspections, funding for the study of public bathroom locations, and two that I'm not sure if we would include in this or not. One is graffiti-free NYC, which we had written a letter about, but didn't necessarily call for incremental funding. And the last one was the funding for the Hell's Kitchen Litter Legion. Those are all on the expense side. And then on the capital side, we had listed last year increasing funding for upgrades to the DSNY core fleet, which from DSNY sounded like still might be an issue with the age of their fleet. So those are all of the not funded and new requests. And the ones that I took off the list, since I think did receive funding, were restoring frequency of litter basket collection to pre-pandemic levels, restoring the frequency of mechanical broom sweeping, and restoring funding for the Better Bin pilot program. So, I don't know if Jesse had any corrections to that list or anything else that I might have missed.
No, so we did me and Blake and I did a quick call with our local superintendent of sanitation to touch base. I always like to try to get a, boots on the ground perspective of what they could use. And Blake hit on all the major points. I think the syringe, the environmental, basically the environmental police and protection unit from DSNY, which is the syringe pickup group, is still very limited to, I think, between 8 and 12 people. And so obviously I think if we as a district are recognizing this is just, the amount of drug use and just the use of syringes in general, and just seeing them everywhere, it does just, there is just a very select group of people that can come and clean those up from the city. And so if we want to, advocate for more of that, I think that's a smart idea. While Blake is right, they did overall, we are back to pre-pandemic levels of basket service. Our superintendent did say that in the past there was funding, that extra funding was put towards an additional, I think from a 12 to 8 shift for basket. service. And so he would welcome that if we wanted to advocate for that. So I think we can word that in a way that's saying we recognize that overall the funding has been restored, but we do wish for that if we wanted to do that. And then the other topic that they did raise was the issue while the broom sweeping has been funded, the issue that Alan knows this, of basically the broom shows up and no one moves their car, is an enforcement issue. And so that is a mix of both DSNY supervisors and enforcement folks traveling with the broom, sort of being the stick to make people move. And also NYPD, actually, they raised that it's actually NYPD traffic enforcement plays a major role in that. So those are the two things that from our sanitation consult local wise that they hit on, but everything else I think Blake was accurate. You did a good job.
Alan, did you have a question? And then David also has his hand raised.
Yeah, I like them all. We'll certainly try to fit them in, knock a few of the old ones out. The bathroom bill is already out of committee unanimously. I think it's going to vote on Thursday. So I don't think we need to include that and take a spot up. But we did send that letter out to support the bill, but that's definitely going to be passed probably on Thursday, and they'll move ahead with it. The other thing, the Hell's Kitchen funding, I think it's a good idea. I think we need to just phrase it properly, because I don't think DOE is going to write the Little Legion a check for them to buy supplies. They do have a program, and I don't know if Katie is on, but according to Katie, they have like Parks Department has the Partnership for Parks. Sanitation has, I think, the foundation of something where they provide material, maybe bags and cleaning products and things like that. So I think we might want to phrase it in terms of offering support for that rather than asking for funding, because they can just turn around and say, well, we don't offer funding. So in terms of phrasing it would be important. But I think it's a pretty good idea. Thanks. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, Blake.
Blake, thank you for the great work. My question is, I don't know if this is appropriate because it might not be in the budget, but I know somehow I'd like to see us funding these containerizations of the trash and then eventually having those things automatically put into the trucks like they do in Europe. I don't know if that's appropriate for now or we're already past that stage and we'll have to think of something for next year. But I just wanted to throw that out there, especially the containerization, even if we don't use it automatically for the trucks, is a great way to keep down rodents and other animals from going into the trash if it's containerized. So I don't know how we can finesse that in or fund something.
Yeah, I was thinking about that one and wondering if we needed to write a letter in order to include that in this year's priorities. I feel like we wrote some related letters, but we did not focus on that specifically.
Yeah, and I think transportation has been taking up a lot of that containerization and working with DOT on that. So we could do maybe something afterwards, maybe get DOT sanitation in to speak on it. But I don't think it would be something we can put into this budget this year. But we should keep that on the forefront, on the burner for us, going forward.
Jesse, I saw
Thanks,
you
Dave.
raised your hand, and I was curious if you wanted to share your perspective on David's suggestion. I remember we did write a letter in this committee in favor of a containerization pilot, although it wasn't this year. We are on record as supporting it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to, and I'm going to be trampling all over what Leslie is about to say. So I will just say, yeah, so far, right, you guys are on record for supporting basically what it's the clean curb a pilot program that's going to be happening very shortly, which is a version of a containerization. And then I think, tell me if I'm wrong, Leslie, I think WPE supported, that was one of their budget requests as well. And just because I was doing them today, I was organizing all of them to this morning. But I also believe we as a board are on record for about the organics program, which in itself is a containers program, including containerization. So I don't, I think we're on record. I think we've already, you certainly can put your weight behind that, but we as a board are going to probably have that up in there and that as a priority already. So, you can maybe, I think maybe it'd be one of those things where you can, support it, but I wouldn't make it one of your necessarily, if you've got a real big priority for, let's say, education or something else, I wouldn't want to use it on that. I would suggest that, but that's my suggestion. But you are on record for supporting that already.
That's helpful. Thank you. Leslie, apologies if I should have gone to you first there.
No, not at all. Jesse is always priority. We all know that. Just to update you, I'd like just some cross stuff. So WPE has put organics in as one of their priorities, which is good because then it could be both from ACES and WPE, which will give it more of a punch, I guess. We also are including corner basket recycling program. We had a very big educational presentation that we have no universal corner basket recycling in our city, 0. So that's included. I know that's not specifically what ACES has talked about, but there's a little bit crossover there. We did that. I just had some questions about Blake's list. So I honestly did not know this, and I was under a different impression that corner basket pickup has gone back to pre-pandemic levels because we still see all the corner baskets overflowing and trash all over them, all over the corners that was not there in pre-pandemic. I was told that it wasn't up to pre-pandemic levels, that they were, but Blake, you can educate me on this. They were saying that I think sometimes the trash pickup on corner baskets were sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. And then, as you know, COVID, it went to like once a week or twice a week. And then it's gone back to 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah, that's what we had heard, and maybe there's something about the routes not being optimized for, the new work from home trend, but the frequency is back to pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every basket in our district is getting picked up twice a day.
Twice a day. Okay. And then you mentioned something about there was some other basket pickup additional that I guess someone wanted to advocate for, Jesse.
In the past, our district had received additional funding, whether it came from DSNY, basically from the mayor's side or from discretionary from the council member side, an additional pickup of my notes are not with me. I had a different plan for today, but I believe my memory it's from the 12 to 8 shift. So
another shift.
Basically, which would allow it basically allows for that weekend to be cleaned up before Monday starts, and so that's what it does.
I mean, knowing that, and we did a district survey that Jesse's office put out about the priorities, and the top 3, actually the top 2 were. Well, one was far and away the number 1 was public safety. I mean, it was just all public safety. And then Jesse, what was second? Affordable housing, I think, to a lesser degree. And then it dipped from there. So then there was 10% was quality of life and cleanliness, that type of thing, right, Jesse? I guess you could include cleanliness. And so, I mean, I would suggest, there's trash all over the place. I don't know if we want to put this, I would love to move this as a priority of what Jesse just said and include it in corner basket pickup, the extra shift, not only to make it a budget priority, but also to make a statement that we need clean streets once again. My suggestion. Second suggestion, the syringe pickup unit was awesome. it used to be fantastic. It would get there within a day. I mean, I think it was in 24 hours. This is pre-COVID. It used to be great. It is now a disaster. I mean, you call and you don't even get responses, and they say it's lack of funding. They disbanded the unit. Then I don't know. There were so many different, right, Jesse? There were so many different things with the syringe collection unit. And I know down in Southern Hell's Kitchen, that's been a huge, huge problem. I would think that we do a strong statement and put syringe collection as a priority as well. And I might, this is not, well, it may not be a popular statement, though. I think with funding the Litter Legion, I just want to be very careful that we keep our city and city agencies accountable for what they should be doing. City agencies should be cleaning the streets. DSNY should be cleaning up syringes. You know, this is the responsibility of our city. And I understand things have happened since COVID, and there have been, you know, like restaurant sheds or like cleanup units. I just want to caution that I don't think that should be the norm, where residents should have to clean up their own trash. You know, that should be a trend. I understand that we should help nonprofits, absolutely, and, you know, and fund them, but I don't want to do that at the cost of excusing city agencies for doing that. You know, saying, hey, we're gonna fund this group of private resident to do that. I mean, listen, I think this is small potatoes. I don't think this is any big, you know, a big budget item, but just FYI in a bigger narrative. Thanks.
Thanks, Leslie. We'll go back to David, and then we'll go to Alan, and then we'll go to Sabrina. Friendly reminder to everybody, though, when we're done with the items for street life, we also need to talk about all the possible items for education and all the possible items for arts. And then we'll go through the activity, actually saying this is what's 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, across all of those. So let's keep that in mind as we talk through these pieces. David?
Okay, quick response to Leslie. I agree with about the Little Legion, but the unfortunate part is we live in a capitalist, laissez-faire country, not in a European country where what you said would be true. It would fall by the wayside, unfortunately. That's just an unfortunate thing of reality. In an ideal world, Leslie, you're 100% right, but my question is, and it might be more of a point of information, and the question is, I remember when Corey was speaker, he had, we'd gotten funding for these waste baskets, which were better than the old school wire baskets. They were almost, for lack of a better word, containerized. What is happening with that? Or is this what we're talking about? I mean, what are the baskets that we're getting? Are they modern baskets, or are they the same baskets that we've had from the 40s?
Matt, do you want to take a swing at that? I don't see Jesse or Blake coming off of mute.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So DSNY has gone through a couple different models of their trash basket. A few years ago, Corey funded you still sort of see them. They're the really big, giant green waste baskets that are out there. They had a lot of issues. A lot of the hinges broke on those baskets, and they were constantly being replaced. Eventually, DSNY went to what we see more typically on the street corners, which are sort of like, and they're referred to as the silver bullet cans. Those still have a lot of design flaws with them. And even DSNY says they're not very great for taking the trash out. DSNY actually loves the wireframe baskets the most. If you talk to them, they're just easy to get the trash out, although they don't have a top container, so things and debris can overspill. So that's the downside. From what I've heard, DSNY is working on a new model. I don't know where in the pipeline this is. So there likely will be a new version of this at some point. But to get to sort of the answer of how these things are funded, it's funded through the city council. There's an NYC cleanup initiative. There's usually several $1,000s set aside to what was done more commonly in the past is just replace the broken ones. So when those green hinges, those green trash containers broke, there was funding there to replace them with new baskets. But they're not that great. I mean, no one really likes them, and they get damaged pretty easily, and they break often. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I thought I would just give a little context and background to sort of those trash cans on the corner.
Appreciate it. I think we're going back to Alan and then to Sabrina.
Well, I like the wire baskets. I think what happens with these new containers is that someone stuffs a box inside a smaller hole, and everybody puts stuff around that hole, and then everything spills over it, and the basket is basically empty. But as far as the Little League, I think, if you compare things to other countries, my experience is that people take care of their own streets, which really isn't happening here in New York, just as a comparison. But we have, for the Parks Department, we have the Partnership for Parks, which encourages community support for their parks and oftentimes offers garbage bags, tools. So there is a precedent for community groups to be active in their own communities. I think what Little League has done has really stepped up community involvement in their own neighborhoods. And again, I don't think we should be asking DOE to write them a check for them to do what DOE wants them to do. I think asking them to support in material and maybe manpower or something like that in terms of how we phrase it. But I think given the fact that when you look at litter baskets, which I do all the time walking around, you find people's residential trash in there. You find people's Amazon boxes in there, which are not recycling properly. So there is a need for community support on a lot of these things, depending on what the area is like. So I think it's a good call. Thanks.
Sabrina and then Jesse, and then maybe we can go back to Blake quickly and then close out the street life piece and move on to another subgroup.
Yes, I just have a question because I'm looking here at the responses of the syringe, and then it says here, due to fiscal constraints, ability of funds is uncertain. So this wasn't funded, right?
It is, the program still exists and there is staff for it. It has not been expanded.
So it exists, but it didn't get more funding, I guess. That's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, per our request. Yeah, I mean,
Per our request,
we're
okay.
asking for more. I think I again, I apologize. I know it's somewhere. I think the lowest it was 8, and I think the highest it's ever been was 12. And I don't know if we're somewhere in that range, and we've been in that range for quite a while. So.
And my other comment is that I understand. I think it would be great if we had more funding for sanitation and all the issues that our city has, particularly through the region. But the reality is that they're coming cuts for all the agencies, and sanitation is a very popular one. So I don't think the mayor will make it doing that many cuts in programs are important to keep the city clean, but they're going to be. So I think it's just, as a community, we need to organize, and it sucks because we should rely on government to do their job, but it's just not. So based on funding, especially what is happening in the next fiscal year. So I would keep that priority just as a realistic of what's coming in the cuts of our budget. So that's my comment.
Jesse, is that a new hand up or?
Yeah, it is. I just wanted to clarify on one thing about the Litter Legion idea component of it. Like Alan's non-for-profit side of DSNY, and in the past, Litter Legion has received discretionary funding.
Discretionary funding, yeah, that's what I meant. To continue to discretionary funding, not as a part of a.
Right. So I just want to say, if we're advocating for Litter Legion, I get Leslie's point completely, and I agree with it. But in terms of just we're in no way kind of siphoning off any kind of funding that would be normally in a budget line for capital and or expense for sanitation, regular. So I just want us to be clear about that. If we're advocating for Little Legion, that funding for that nonprofit would be coming from, most likely, honestly, would be from the council, which, this document does just go directly to City Hall, but it is a broader document that we send around to all parties involved. And so just for clarity's sake on that, that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Sabrina. Thanks, Jesse. So let's try to close this out. We still have both education and arts to talk through. But Blake, any thoughts before we talk about all the things together in a little bit?
This is more of a question, but I think last year we had submitted to the budget task force each of the subgroups lists separately. And I'm just wondering if that might be a good approach for this year as well, given kind of the incompatibility or incomparability, some of the, say, education requests and the street life requests.
Wesley, I'm going to put that to you. Would you prefer that we have 3 lists from this committee, or do you want us to talk about across the 3 lists we could generate how this group would prioritize?
One whole list coming from ACES. Because if you give us 3 lists, then we have to prioritize for it. You have to fill. I mean, I know Alan's on the committee, but if you do one whole list, then we just go ACES. This is your first, second, third. Because when we send in this, it is a statement district needs as a whole. But when we send in our quote unquote requests, they're going to go to separate agencies anyway.
Mhm.
So, if DOE, say if we have some sort of education as number 1, and then number 2 is basket pit, whatever it is, they're going to go separate, and they're going to be number 1 for each of those respective agencies. So one whole list, I guess, to answer is the answer.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Jesse,
Yeah,
is that Jesse? Is that what you would say?
Yeah, no, completely. Yeah, and just
I don't-
recognize that the committee tomorrow is going to be looking at a combination of 6 to 7 lists already. So by making it additional lists is going to make it more difficult. And I think you want to speak strongly in unison as a committee.
Yeah, I don't really recall, and you may be right, like, I don't really recall going in there with separate lists for different groups. I think we gave them a list of what we prioritized at this meeting. So, like I said, I could be wrong, but it's hard enough trying to put however many committees there are who are vying for a spot on the list to come up with their own requests. So I think we will stick with one priority list would be enough for them to handle. Okay.
All right, so we'll shoot for 1 list, and we will pivot to education, and then we'll close out with arts. Alan and Jesse, I might pass this over to you in a moment, because you two did a lot of outreach to principals to confirm were the things that they asked for from the city council still the things that they wanted to prioritize, and probably best speak to the responses we got from individual principals. But just to tee that up a little bit, a number of us had the opportunity to reconnect with Kelly McGuire, who is the superintendent of District 2, which our boundaries exist within. He's superintendent of a geographical area that includes multiple community boards, and both hear from him on what he feels like are the big things that his team is focused on in terms of opportunities and challenges, but also Jesse got him to sort of reconfirm that the top priorities for him are the things that we had asked about last year. And so I think the headline is the superintendent feels like the priorities are largely the same as they were last year. In terms of Wi-Fi infrastructure, his feeling was that's something that always needs to be tended to because it's a bit of a moving target. And then security cameras, where we've actually had some success that we surfaced in our conversation with SCA in part, continues to be a big need. But Alan, Jesse, anyone else who's on that meeting who wants to add anything that I might be missing, and then we can sort of talk through principal by principal, what we've heard them confirm they definitely would like.
I'll just say, yeah, I think that was just my question at the end there about the three major capitals that were kind of, we had, and those are for kind of district wide. So we really, the security cameras, we had a list of schools in them. And I think Alan can confirm, I don't have everything in front of me, but I believe like one of them off our list actually is going ahead with security cameras. Maybe two, which is great. But with the lesson we learned between our conversations with SCA and then and the superintendent is that basically security cameras, the priority is for high schools, and I think our priority historically has been for middle and grammar schools, and so that is some success. And Wi-Fi was the other one, and the bathrooms were the other. And we historically have just said across the board for the whole district that all bathrooms projects, student, staff all together should be funded. And so again, we've had some movement on those through SCA projects, which is great. I will say the other thing that I think Kelly obviously highlighted, which I think was the predominant, the majority of our conversation was an expense, which is the need for both bilingual support staff, social workers, teachers all across the board, everything in our schools that are kind of managing the population increase from the asylum seeking folks that are showing up that are being brought here. So I think that was the major part of it from the expense.
Just to clarify, my understanding from what I heard him say was that is the priority, is identifying those folks, but I wasn't necessarily sure he was saying that schools and the system couldn't pay for them as much as those folks were in short supply.
You might be right, but I don't. Maybe I'm putting words in his mouth, and I don't mean to. So, but I do think that was just a topic, for sure. So I agree with you there. That's and the rest of them. So I think this year we did it a different model, and I think it really actually worked. We got a lot of principals responding to us pretty quickly about basically we took the list of unfunded projects that came from the council member's office, and we followed up with those principals and said, are these still a priority for you, these unfunded projects, even though you might already have a project that's being funded or in the pipeline of being funded, is this still a priority? And they got back to us pretty quickly and I think Alan sent around a master list of all of those. And so, I think you guys can decide how you want to sort of filter those all out. But I do think the idea of the capital projects that have the most impact of all the schools in our district being kind of at the top makes sense. And then however we, want to figure out the rest of those individual schools, however you guys want to do it. I will just say, to give a little bit of a understanding of how it works, is that like really the budget task force tomorrow is going to focus probably on like the first 20 requests, both capital and expense, right? Because after that, we're talking, they can just go on and go on and on. So after that, we'll probably just kind of like basically do one from each committee, so then everybody sort of gets a fair share. And the first 20 or so are kind of like, what should we be saying our priority is as a community is. So I don't want us to get all kind of caught up with, I don't think it's use of your time tonight getting caught up whether school A's, ADA, gymnasium issue is better or worse than school C's, HVAC. You'll spend all that time arguing, and then it's just going to end up being 29 and 35, maybe, at the end of the document for us, because you're dealing with 7, 8, 9 other committees. So I just want to make that clear to folks.
Yeah, we'll go to Josephine and then Katie in a second, but I think that's a helpful point. And I think the way that we sort of bundled security cameras, we heard that from a number of schools, is a good approach, rather than this school wants this school wants this school wants this, if there is overlap that we can highlight. Josephine?
Jesse may have answered one of my questions, but the first is I think it's worth following up with Kelly to find out if that expense is, if the need for bilingual teachers and social workers, is that an expense need, or is that something that they can cover? They're just waiting for bodies to show up or whatever. I think it would be good to know that. And then the second issue, it's just getting into the nitty gritty. And, like I said, Jesse may have answers, but just with the bathrooms, are we going to be able to prioritize schools? Because like PS 51 is a new school. So I don't, we're bundling all the cameras. I'm just wondering, are we doing the same with the bathrooms? Because like PS 111 and PS 33, of what I've seen, those are really in need of the bathrooms and would be a priority for those two schools. That's it.
Yeah, just to respond quickly to the bundling piece, if I remember correctly, what we did with the security cameras is we said, these are all of the schools that we know of that would benefit from that. So I think we could hypothetically do something similar with bathrooms or with another area. And we can try reaching out to Kelly to get clarity, but the meeting to make all the decisions does happen tomorrow. So we have a narrow window to get that extra context. Katie?
Can I answer the first part of her question? Josephine, I think if this committee deems it a priority about the bilingual teachers, then first of all, that would be probably an expense, because it would be under expense, not capital, because capital is usually brick and mortar things, and expense or ongoing or staff and salary. And if this committee thinks it's a priority, we should put it in, because regardless of whether it's getting funded or where it's getting funded, we do not take that into account necessarily when we make our requests, because a lot of times what will happen is we will make the request and then it says this is funded, or yes, this is planned to be funded. At least we know what the response is, or we don't have that until next year, whatever it is. So I think we should do it if you guys want to do it. And also just to give just a little bit of a illustration. So when we hand in this list, it's not just a list, it's like a big packet. It's like a big document, and it actually comes with a summary. We write all these paragraphs before the trends in our district, what's going on. And like last year, COVID was a big trend. This year we are, and sorry, Kit and Alan, I'm actually writing it right now, but I am paying attention to the meeting. We're writing a segment on migrants and coming into our, that's a new trend in our district. And I think if we mention it in the summary saying, hey, there are migrants coming in our district, we expect funding to go with that, with the needs that they have. It wouldn't be unusual, Josephine, to then obviously add the bilingual teachers in as an expense to illustrate that point.
Thanks.
Thanks, Leslie. Katie and then Alan.
Thanks. So Leslie, that was super helpful in what Josephine said too. I was going to say, I certainly heard when I listened to that call with the superintendent, but that he really was saying how important the bilingual teachers are. And I think that we should include it in our budget, even if it's already even if they do have the funding. I think we need to show how much we support them having that. So Leslie, I think that's a super helpful answer, that we should include it, even if it might already be funded, because it's consistent with what he said, and it's consistent with what we're saying overall. We care about these asylum seekers and making sure they get what they want. But to that end, I have another process question, which is related to supporting the asylum seekers and knowing that our schools right now have so many extra needs because of all of the new asylum seekers. One of the suggestions that we heard from Iris Gersten, who works with the students in the shelters and with the asylum seeking families, is that she said that the schools all have after-school programs. And it would be super helpful if there was funding for the after-school programs to allow students who can't afford the after-school programs to be able to participate in the after-school programs. So I didn't know if but we obviously don't have a letter on that. So I don't know if, like, process-wise, if one of the things we need to discuss this evening, maybe separately, or I don't know how we do it, is to say, we'd like to write a letter about that. And if there's any way we could include that in a list of expense requests, or it's too late and we can write a letter in support of that maybe at the next meeting, but we would have to wait till next year's budget request. So I guess that's a question I have.
Jesse, that feels like your lane. I feel like we've done both. We've said we need to have a letter, or we've directly heard from the community or from someone who is a city official in some capacity. And Iris is certainly a city official, she's a DOE employee. So would that be sort of enough to substantiate that budget request, or do we need to have more behind it?
There's no like completely hard and fast rule on this. I think, and Leslie, we can knows this too. I think this topic is going to be a big topic tomorrow, both because multiple committees, even outside of housing, have had added to their priority list the support for this population and this issue. So I think it will be a topic, and I think if we have a city official that we know and that we trust, who's been before our committee, that has voiced this as an issue, and you guys all collectively think, yes, we can definitely have Iris come next month and talk about it, so you guys have more information and having more and more of your questions answered, and maybe you do write a letter, official letter. But we do have a timeline on this, and so I do think if again, I think we'll be talking about shelter, emergency shelter, emergency housing tomorrow about this for this population. So mostly because they're all showing up at our front door, at the Port Authority and other places, and so and we want to support them, and so I don't see it being necessarily too much of a process issue if you guys want to make that a request.
So you're saying, Jesse, like we could make like sort of support for or expansion of after school programs for children whose families can't afford it, whether they're asylum seekers or not, or should we would it be helpful to specify?
I mean, I think that's what we're talking about, though, right? That's what Iris is raising, and so I do think we want to keep it to right. If we've certainly had the Department of Youth and Community Development here before, and I included their spreadsheet numbers in your Dropbox about after-school programs in our district. So, but that's notwithstanding the asylum seeker need. So I do think you want to specify that. I think if you're saying something that, we just think in general after-school programs need to be funded more. We have said that in the past, but I think we've stepped away from that because we felt like after hearing from DYCD that we believe that was sufficient. But if you're saying about that particular population, that would sort of make more sense to say, okay, in this particular need, in this situation, this time, we're advocating for this request.
So I guess I would support both of those. Certainly mentioning what Kelly said about the bilingual teachers, bilingual staff, and then I would support expanding after-school opportunities for families.
Yeah, one quick footnote, and other folks should correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he specified mental health professionals when he said that bilingual staff would be his number one ask. So I think it was specifically teachers and mental health professionals who are bilingual. Thanks, Katie. We have 3 more hands that I can see right now. So we'll go to Alan, then to Sabrina, and then to Charlie.
Just to follow up on the expanded social workers and teachers, we already have that in expense. We probably had it for the last maybe 2 years at least. The only thing we could what we should probably do is just change some of the wording to include bilingual. So we've had that in our expense budget over the last, I think, 2 years now. So it's been there. Unfortunately, when we asked for expanded baseline funding for licensed social workers in all schools within Manhattan School District 2, the response was, funding decision for this request follows a different budget process. RFP, local level decision. In other words, pass it over to your electeds. But we can just maybe reword that since it's in there already, and plug in bilingual, and add in teachers. So just want to point that out.
Thanks, Alan. Sabrina?
I just want to comment a little bit about the update on the situation in Port Authority and the policy right now as today. On Wednesday, October 12th, Biden administration voted Title 42, which means that all the borders asylum seekers in Texas who were seeking asylum or were trying to seek asylum in the US are being deported back to Mexico. Most of the folks are Venezuelans, so there is a program. They are accepting up to 24,000 right now, and the application is only online, which this translates to us that there are no longer any buses coming to Port Authority. I actually was volunteering, and for the last week or so, maybe there's been 1 or 2 buses, but there's just no more buses. So I think it's a good way of seeing it that, like, as it now, if the policy of Title 42 it's not longer in place, then more migrants might be coming. But as of this moment, most of the asylum seekers, so 90% of them are Venezuelans, and they're not allowed as of this time. So we should think about, like, it doesn't change anything, but it's what we have now. So we got to manage the situation, but they're not more coming. Again, just an update on the policy. It could change. This is us today. I follow immigration very closely. So yeah, just an update.
Thanks, Sabrina. Charlie?
Yeah, I don't know how helpful this is, but I just wanted to bring up in terms of funding for our schools that have received the asylum seekers is that a lot of them, I think, have had their budgets cut because they've lost students due to families leaving the city during the pandemic. And from what I've heard, my wife is on the PTA of PS2 and 2, and I believe it's the case with 2 and 2, 51 and 111 in Hell's Kitchen, that they've all had their budgets decrease based on their enrollment declining, and then they've particularly 51 and 111, but in recent weeks, 212 as well has been receiving. I think they've gotten 24 new families in the last week. So, you know, their budgets were cut due to declining numbers, and now the numbers are back up with, you know, families that have a lot of needs. So, supporting anything we can put, you know, prioritize in terms of bilingual support or any other support that the schools can get.
Thanks, Charlie. Alan, I'll turn it over to you in a second, but just want to double tap on what Charlie was lifting up about school budgets right now being a moving target and also being constrained. I think I've probably said this before to this group, but you know, the system has shed over 100,000 students in the last 5 years. And in this country, schools get funded based on enrollment. So the DOE, like every other system in the country, benefited from federal funding and will benefit for the next couple of years, but their fiscal outlook is very challenging given the enrollment trends that they are seeing. So we should probably all take that into account as we're thinking about what to prioritize across the different topics. Alan, do you want to just tick off what are the things we heard back from principals?
Sure. Actually, we had 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 schools responded back. I'll just read off the school and what they considered was their priority. And most of them actually were high schools. PS11 is request. No, they changed the name of the school to Sarah J. Garnett. So I guess when all the scaffolding comes down, they want to get a new sign. That is their priority. So
Is that capital or expense, Alan?
new school sign should be there for at least 50 years. Yeah.
Capital?
That would be capital.
Speaking of PS 212, windows and security cameras.
Wait, Alan, I'm sorry. PS11's, that was their first priority, was a new sign when the scaffolding
That's
came
it.
down?
That's it. I mean, he's been asking for the ADA, the lift, and some other things.
Yeah,
but,
Jesse, I think has something.
Yeah, we asked. Yeah. We
this is
sent him. Yeah.
These are
Point of
Yeah.
information, what does a new sign cost?
Ah.
Well,
They're
because I mean, if
expensive.
it's a lot of money, forget it. If
Yeah,
it's
no.
not, then give them the goddamn new sign.
So
Okay.
clarity again, remember, this is a list of unfunded projects.
Right.
So we got a list of unfunded projects. These are the principals and the schools sent in as and Matt knows from his history, right? They apply through a number of different ways for different projects, right? Capital, different type of capital projects, reservoir projects, and things like that. This was the Eric Councilmember Botcher's list of unfunded projects. We followed up and said, is this still a priority? Rather than us putting our weight behind a project that is funded, right? We decide, we wanted to know about the unfunded projects. So that is why we have those questions. So that is what that was on the list for 11.
Right. Still on the list is the ADA lift and the security camera. So there are in the budget request still those items are still there. New York City Museum School responded. Bathroom upgrade, actually, they were funded by the Manhattan Borough President's Office. Manhattan Bridges High School replaced the gym floor. So whatever else, Manhattan Bridges High School, I think they had a roof situation also that's been on our list. And I think an update on that is that is being scoped out. Upgrade roof repair, science lab. That's in the construction phase. So actually, we've been talking about Manhattan Bridges with the leaking roof into the lab rooms. That one is finally getting funded, and they're in permits and approvals at this point. So we maybe want to move that out of our list and give room to another priority. Environmental studies, we had a roof situation. Also, that's been resolved. It seems their priority now is this bleacher project that was funded prior to pandemic, was put on hold, costs went up, supply chain problems, blah, blah, blah. So that to them is a priority at this point also. And Business of Sports School wants library design for their students to be able to do better research. So these are a whole group. They're on the list. Some of them we may take up, depending on what else we have. Some of them we may not at this point. So when we move to the main body of the budget request list, we'll deal with that when we get there.
Let me just make sure for my notes that I'm going to share back with everybody. I'm capturing all of these. So PS11, their number one thing was signage for their new name. Bridges High School is a gym floor. High School for Environmental Studies was new bleachers, and Business Sports High School, they want a new library. Those are the responses.
I could send you the list for your notes. No problem. Other than that, shoot.
Any other comments on education items before we do one last pivot to arts, before we open it up to what are our top priorities overall? All right. I actually don't see the folks who lead up our arts subgroup. Do you want to voice over that piece, Alan?
I guess so. Well, I just looked back at some of the presentations that we had and some of the letters that we had written. So I'll just read these off. Support local journalism. That was a big topic. We had a panel discussion on that. We had a lot of discussion back and forth. It seems that there is some money going out to our local media newsletters. There is I think we should request that as a priority from our arts and culture people. Fountain House, they made a presentation. Do we want to support them or ask for support for them? And we did do a letter about support, reasserting MCB4 reasserts its support of the partial restoration of DACLA, but we need more funding. So we want to make a general statement. I think we have that already in the expense budget. You can take a look at it as we go through it. But those are the only ones that I saw for culture.
What was that third
We
one?
had a presentation. We had a presentation from Hudson Guild, but I don't know if we want to go over there, but that was about it.
Could you say one more time, Alan, that third one? I heard the local media, I heard Fountain House, and then who was the third group?
Well, it was a general statement to support the Department of Cultural Affairs. I think we have that already. Maybe we want to jazz it up a little bit, reword it a little bit, put some punch into it in terms of how it affects our community. I don't have the wording on the in front of me now, but we've already had that in the budget request.
Yeah. Jesse, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just two things about arts and culture. I think we certainly do have a number of specific local organizations that came before us recently that we've written letters on. So I think that's good. And regarding the media one, this is all related to the prior administration directing basically their agencies to provide to use minority owned and focused and local press to get out their media campaigns on whatever they're doing. So I think that's already in place. That was set up by the prior administration. I could see us doing a continuing support for that as an arts and culture thing. In terms of whether that's part of, it's a sort of a broad perspective on arts and culture, but that we could do that. But I just in terms of that being in an active unless we're saying we want to expand the funding, that's different. But they did do this program in which they and we heard, and Alan's right, we had a number of folks from the local presses be there. Some of them, I think, unfortunately, most of them did not make the initial cut for funding for that funding expansion. So I could see us, highlighting the fact that we would like to make sure our local press get, considered for that future program. And I will say one thing, Alan. I don't remember in the past whether we've just wholesale supported Department of Cultural Affairs funding in the budget requests, but I know we wrote the letter, so we certainly can do that now if we'd like to, and that would cover a lot of the bases of those individual projects. So if we wanted to, the way we want to word it, similar to bundling some of the DOE stuff, is funding DCA in particular, these programs, which we do that with other committees. And with affordable housing, we say, we want to support senior housing in particular at these locations. So we could do that there, and that would help bundle, and therefore you're sort of minimizing the number of requests you're having to worry about.
There's expand and continue to fund open culture legislation. Would that fall under it?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting.
Expanding the program so that more cultural organizations are eligible for the program at or whatever, little or no cost, something like that.
Yeah, that would, I mean,
we could maybe reword that.
We might want to make that separate. We might want to pull that out as a separate one from the general DCA one.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Because it's a different program. It's not,
Yeah.
but just because you have to realize also agencies respond to these, and so if you are asking them so much in one question, they're going to basically write back and say, you're asking about too many different, I can't give an answer to this.
Right.
So that's, I do
confusing.
think we want to do open culture as a separate item, compared to the rest of just sort of straight normal, what we would consider traditional funding, DCA funding for all the Fountain House Gallery, Hudson Guild's arts program, those types of things. I would maybe separate those out.
Okay.
All right. So I think now the real fun can begin. We need to walk out of here with a list of what are the capital items and what are the expense items that we want to prioritize as a committee. We have a lot of possibilities. And so I think maybe it makes sense to initially get people's thoughts on, is there an area that we want to lead with one or two or three items? Is there another area that we don't think is the priority? And then maybe we can segue into, within the areas that we want to prioritize, what are the top things to start to get to a draft list of, these are our itemized picks. Do you want to add?
Can we
anything
lead
to
with
that, Alan?
education?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe you want to go through the list and see which ones we knock out or move out first,
Yeah,
and then create spaces so we can do that.
I was thinking I might share my screen and read through the notes that I've captured so far. And then we could open it up for discussion if that works. Can folks see my screen okay? Should I zoom in a little bit? So in street life, we heard from Blake, increased sanitation enforcement, increased residential trash pickup in problem areas, reinstate curbside organics collection, which also is something that WPE is going to emphasize, increase funding for DSNY environmental police, which is the syringe pickup service, restore funding for curbside e-waste, more funding for rodent enforcement. Funding for a study of public bathrooms is no longer a need because there's legislation pending to push that through. Funding for graffiti-free NYC, funding for the Litter Legion, funding to study containerization and automation, which are things that may get touched on by both WPE and transportation. And then I think that last one actually was not from Blake. I think that was a suggestion that we heard from David. And then the last piece, I believe, was Leslie's suggestion around corner basket pickup. And on the capital side, there was also a suggestion around increasing the funding for truck fleets. On education, on the expense side, bilingual teachers, bilingual mental health professionals, and then funding to give more families access to after-school programs. On the capital side, security cameras, Wi-Fi, and bathroom renovations are the same three top categories from last year. One school specifically that asked for bathrooms was New York City Museum School. And then we also heard from individual schools about other items. PS11 wants more signage or new signage because they've changed their name. Bridges wants a gym, a floor to be specific. environmental studies needs bleachers, and businesses, sports, high school would like a library. And then for our third and final area, arts, it was all on the expense side. Maybe a continuing support designation for supporting local media, which we've asked for in the past. Fountain House funding, or funding sort of as a bundle for DCA, where we would specify the programs that we want to direct it to. Maria, it sounded like maybe you had something to say.
Yeah, what I was saying earlier, you asked a question about what do we want to prioritize, and I was going to say education. And when we're thinking about something that keeps coming up in housing, health, and human services, I hear it coming up here, and like Jesse said, it's coming up at other committees, is the whole situation with the asylum seekers. So thinking about that and moving that to the top, things that are requesting like bilingual school staff. So that is my proposal.
Alan, I'm not sure if your hand is, excuse me, still up or up again. David Warren.
Yes. Hi. My thing would be for expenses for increased enforcement and Little Legion. Also, the graffiti, I wouldn't waste our time on that. Forget it. And for capital, the truck fleet, that would be a priority for me.
Other folks, especially if you have a specific area that you think we should be focused on more so than a specific item, either telling Maria that she's absolutely wrong or that she's 100% right.
Maria's always 100% right.
I agree.
I'll pay you later,
50%
Leslie. I'll pay you later.
50% at a time.
We could save a lot of
And you're not
time if we
getting
just let
anything.
Maria make all the decisions. We didn't even discuss anything then.
I was basically saying that I have a little bit of a point of a departure from Maria, that I think that it should be
Yes, you did.
sanitation. That's all. I mean, education is very important, but I think sanitation is what we see and what is so out front.
Well,
Obviously,
they-
education is for the future of our youth. So, I mean, in our society, that's important too. But I think, they get so much funding education and they get from the PTAs and the Board of Education. So,
question, Leslie. I'm sorry. I just wanted to be reminded, what were the top priorities that came up from the survey? I know, like affordable housing.
Yeah, top three. Number one by far was public safety.
Oh,
far and away. Number two, then if you go down a little bit, would be affordable housing.
mhm.
And then it was like kind of then it was quality of life. More like trash, quality of life, that type of thing. But we don't have to go, and Jesse and I were talking about this offline. Listen, the survey was a couple hundred people.
Yeah. I
I
understand what you're gonna.
though it's a good barometer. I mean, certain things are a good barometer. Like I think we do know, parents, singles, public safety is kind of at the forefront of a lot of people's minds, regardless of your demographic, necessarily. That someone who's maybe not a parent wouldn't put education because they're not in the school system. It doesn't mean that it's less important. It's just what is coming up in the survey. So it's just kind of an overview of maybe we could just take it into account and not necessarily go by it line by line.
Thanks, Leslie. I see Charlie's hand is next, then we'll go to Katie, then we'll go to Wendy, then we'll go back to Alan, then we'll go to Josephine.
Yeah, I would echo education being priority. I feel like our neighborhood schools we're already, struggling with the pandemic, and the kids have just been through so much, and the school's been through so much with the cohort learning and the hybrid learning and the budget cuts. And I feel like, from what I know of PS2 and 2 more firsthand, they were almost having to cut 2 teachers because they don't have the budget they just barely eked out the ability to pay their existing staff based on these cuts. So, and now on top of that, getting new families, this big influx of new families, I think it's, anything we can do to prioritize that from a budget perspective. And then my number 2 is sanitation. And I agree also with what David says, is that it's, it's what we see. It's You know, every day walking on the street, you see the overflowing curbside baskets. I agree with Leslie that I think that needs to be a priority. If it's back up to 2019 levels, well, it's still not acceptable. And I think it's great that we have the ACES people on 9th and 10th. I don't know if we can, through this, ask for more of them or just ask for more basic service, but it's not hitting the mark. So we should send a message on that.
Thank you. Katie?
Yep, I agree that we should prioritize education. If I heard people correctly earlier, it sounds like what we sort of put as our top 3 are sort of what are going to matter most. And if that's the case, then I guess I would suggest we do our first 2 are education, and our third one is sanitation. So maybe, you know, maybe we could group under education, like our first priority could be bilingual teachers and mental health professionals, like group that together. And I guess I'm talking about expenses right now, because it sounds like under capital, we can leave the same priority that we had before. It sounds like everyone supported that. And then maybe whatever our second education one we want it to be, whether it's the after school, or I mean, I'm not sure if we have to do like top expense, top capital. But anyway, I would just say that I think we should do like 2 education, and then we should pick one of the sanitation ones to be our third priority and not push it any further down than that, because we do want to prioritize that too. And frankly, to that point earlier about the survey and stuff, I would just say, you know, people say that public safety is their #1 concern, and people say that, you know, one of the strongest correlations between good safety is good schools, right? So we can say we are actually taking it into consideration as we prioritize our schools. So anyway, that would be my thought. Oh, and also just, sorry, back to you were mentioning the bathrooms, funding to renovate the bathrooms. I think the bathrooms that Josephine mentioned earlier are different than the NYC Museum School. So maybe we just have to list more of them, but I think I heard different examples from her about the bathrooms. That's all for me.
Thank you. Wendy?
Katie actually took a lot of the words out of my mouth. So I think in terms of prioritization, I agree. It's hard to argue with not prioritizing education. But I'm also obviously a huge proponent of improving the sanitation of our neighborhoods. So I think we could either do 1 and 2 as education. We could also do, I would be supportive of education. Perhaps it's the bilingual teachers. And then our second priority being something from sanitation. I think increasing probably the residential trash pickup, although I would also be in favor of making a strong statement around increasing the funding for the environmental police, given that syringe pickup has been an issue now for many years. And then our third being education, but I wouldn't argue if we wanted to keep education 1 and 2.
Kit, may I
Thank
jump
you.
in here for 1 second? I
Is
think
it a
Jesse-
process piece?
Yeah. Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong. If we're going to ask for bilingual staff, whatever that says, right? Whatever the detail, that would be not a capital, right? That would be an expense.
Yes.
So we can, you know, we have wiggle room here, guy. You know what I mean? We can make that #1 expense, and then some, you know what I mean? Like they're 2 separate items, 2 separate lists. FYI.
Yes, I mean, you can do it either way, where you guys are going to prioritize the topics and then you break that out through either expense and capital, or you can do it from expense and capital and prioritize it from there. But anything that dealing with staffing, you know, additional staffing, additional programming, anything along those lines is always going to be expense. So.
Looks like Alan is next, then Josephine, and then Leslie. If there are other comments that you wanted to make, we can go back to, and then I'll try to do a summary of what I think I've heard so far for folks to react to.
I'll pass this along to Josephine first. I'd just like to hear what she has to say.
Okay, probably no surprises here. But first, certainly for expenses, I would do 1 and 2 education, and then the third would be the sanitation enforcement. And I would also be fine if you wanted to do on the capital, then starting with the increased funding for the truck fleet, and then, which is a hard one, but you know, and then going to maybe doing 2 and 3 for education, the Wi-Fi and the either the security cameras or the bathrooms. I'm not sure where you are with the security cameras, so maybe it's the bathrooms. I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you. You want to get back in? Technically, you're up next, but we could also let Leslie go, and then you could get your bit before I try to summarize.
Yeah, just a comment as I listened. A lot of the things that we see, garbage, bikes, those kind of like hard services, those are all fixable, so to speak. Maybe you have to throw more money in, maybe you have to throw more people in. But if you don't provide Wi-Fi for a student, if you don't have a proper library for a student, if they can't do experiments, they move on. You can't fix that anymore. So I sort of was taken aback when the results of the survey came back and 0 people voted for education. So it would seem that perhaps maybe folks who had kids in school weren't the ones who responded to it. I mean, that's always a possibility. And you see things right in front of you, as you say, the garbage is overflowing, people are running red lights, the streets are this and that. But, you know, once you lose a student who hasn't been given the opportunities to learn, they have a hard time sometimes making that up. So you can't go a year later and fix that problem because the student has already probably been moved on. So the other thing I wanted to point out, in our budget requests, we put in a lot of requests from principals for tech support, lab support. Since 2018 or 2017, when we first started getting responses from the agencies, we've had about 23 or 24 budget requests for tech and lab budget items. DOE SEA has funded 2 items out of those. And that was revolving around the pandemic when they needed devices to be loaned and repairs. There were 2 requests that we made for those. So if you look at the other information that was in the Dropbox, it's the council member and the Manhattan Borough President's Office that are doing the actual funding for a lot of these items that DOE is not doing. And I probably mentioned this before also. 80% of what we've requested from DOE has gotten rejected. So in order to make room, I think, in order to make room for a lot of these new requests that we might be making, you might want to think about dropping a lot of these requests that are on the sheets that get rolled over year after year after year, and either put them in a list for our council member and our Manhattan Borough President's Office, and make room for some new requests, some new priorities, and move on from there. That's a suggestion I'm going to make once we hit the actual sheets. Thank you.
Leslie?
Just 2 things. One, just I want to agree with exactly what Charlie said, and then subsequently Josephine and Wendy about the placement. And then I want to specifically agree with Wendy on the environmental police, I guess they call it, the syringe collection unit. And then so just add my voice to that mix as well. And then just to follow up on what Alan said, if you guys want to think about this, because sometimes it's a little bit strategic too, and Alan made a really good point. Sometimes when like the big asks are all our 1, 2, 3, 4 priority, it's a lot for DOE. But if we push up something like, syringe collection, that's something that is not necessarily billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars, but it's our third priority. It's more of a win. It could be doable. It could be gettable. Not that should dissuade us from saying what we want, but there has to be a little bit of a strategy also, I think, maybe to think about it in that way.
Thank you, Leslie. So let me do my best to try and synthesize what I believe that I've heard, and then we can open it back up. But it sounded like there was general consensus around on the expense side of things. Yeah, reverse my order here. Going with an education item, then an education item, then a sanitation item. And it sounded like on the capital side of things, potentially actually leading with sanitation, and then having some education items. We can start with expense and then work our way down to capital. There was a lot of support for this item around bilingual educators. I'm going to suggest that we actually bundle that one so that we can cover more territory. We say bilingual educators, specifically teachers and mental health professionals. That gives us room to then also potentially push for funds so that more students who otherwise might not be able to can participate in after school. And then it sounded like there was the most support for the environmental police who do syringe pickup, getting a boost in funding on the expense side. Let me pause there and just ask the group, does that feel right based on what you've heard your colleagues say, or what am I missing? Hal?
Rather than environmental police, I was thinking an increase in the for the Little Legion and also for enforcement, but not for like the syringes, but for the vehicles parked and stuff like that. That would be more of a priority.
Is there one that you want to suggest, David? Because we could put it to a vote. What does everyone want, one or the other? But we're sort of as a group saying we're going to pick one sanitation expense to put in that 3 spot. So there's got to be one that's more popular than the environmental police.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I would go with whatever the group wants on either one of what I suggested. So how does anyone else feel in the group? And I'll second whatever they, because I'm flexible on those 1 or 2 issues.
Can you say one more time which 2 you're trying to suggest instead of environmental police?
The enforcement of the cars parked at the alternate side of the street parking or the Little Legion. I mean,
so this first one around sanitation enforcement or literally
sanitation doesn't write tickets for alternate side.
they
Right.
can, I believe, can't they? Or when people are putting trash in the personal trash, like their Amazon boxes in the baskets.
Oh, that if they see them doing that's a fine. It says right on the bin. It's a $200 fine for.
Right. So something like that. Yeah.
But when the sanitation officer comes down the street, he doesn't write tickets for people who aren't moving their cars, from what I've seen. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's usually the traffic people.
Yeah, it's a traffic ticket.
Sanitation, when we spoke with sanitation, they were, it was technically what they were claiming, what they were reporting out as what they would want more of is on their side of it being a supervisor, more supervisors being able to drive with the broom trucks. But the enforcement really does come from NYPD traffic enforcement. So that's a different agency. So if we were going to make that request for enforcement component, it would be under NYPD.
Got a lot of hands, so let's go to hands, and then maybe from that we'll have a clearer sense of what, if anything, might be as popular and ask as the environmental police. We'll go Katie, then Charlie, then Mercedes, then Maria.
I fear I'm not going to be terribly helpful here because I was actually going to suggest a different thing. I was going to suggest the curbside organics because seems like that is something that we've heard about quite a bit, that people would like that, but so I know that's not terribly useful. But I guess back to David's question, between the two he suggested, I think it would be more popular is the sanitation enforcement, if that's the question on the table. But anyway, I think it would be great, especially because another one of our own committees is suggesting the curbside organics. I think it would be great to have our committee ask for that as well.
You're right. Very unhelpful, but totally valid. Charlie?
I wonder if we can sort of roll up enforcement, like with the environmental police syringe pickup and also enforcement of the other issues. I mean, I agree that the syringes are a problem. I volunteer with Litter Legion, and we, every time we go out, we find a couple. But to me, the more like glaring neighborhood emergency is just trash everywhere, including like illegal dumping in front of abandoned buildings and busted trash bags, and it's just sort of all over the place. And I'd love to see landlords getting fined. I don't know if we've written a letter about that, but if we could make that more broader, just enforcement of all of the trash violations that are happening in our neighborhoods. And then I would say I would sort of lean on the side of putting a sanitation thing number 2 and education 1 and 3, but I don't feel strongly.
Thank you, sir. Mercedes, you're up next. Mercedes, if you are talking, I think you might still be on mute.
Hi, I'm sorry about that. It wasn't letting me unmute. I just wanted to reinforce that the education is super important, but I also think the trash pickup and enforcing the violations is so important. And also some background with elementary schools, usually the funding for the after school is like parent funded, and I know they offer some scholarships. So I know we've heard from groups that like do after school programs when we've heard arts programs. So maybe like encouraging some of those programs to go into the schools so that they could get funding would be great. I'm done speaking.
Alan?
I have a compromise suggestion. Increase funding for rat inspections through DOH. That's it.
I thought that we had that on here. Yeah, funding for rodent enforcements. This is another one that we could potentially.
Great compromise, Alan. And Katie also had a good compromise.
Can I hear what the
Maria.
compromise was? My phone died. What was the compromise that Alan suggested?
Well, I'm actually going to try to combine Charlie's compromise and Alan's compromise, because I think Charlie's suggestion about how do we think about enforcement as an umbrella could actually potentially capture 3 of the finalists under street life for expense. I think environmental police is related to enforcement. I think sanitation enforcement is pretty explicitly related to enforcement. And I think the rodent enforcement piece is related to enforcement. So we could actually have one that captures 3 of the 5 that people have lifted up so far as potential priorities, unless Jesse's about to.
Can I just?
Leslie's saying no.
It's a different agency.
Can't.
The rats are a different agency. They stand alone.
Well, should we suggest that we actually create an entirely separate agency just to work on the rat issue?
Yeah, Department of Health.
Yeah. Let's go back to hands. Maria, did you have something else to say, or that was your question?
No, I actually raised my hand. I didn't realize everyone else had a hand up. Or I may not have raised my hand, but I was thinking for number 3, where it says expense, based on things that I heard other committee members saying, and I assumed that increasing residential trash pickup in problem areas was going to be the 3rd one. But that would have been, I guess, my suggestion. But, whatever the committee decides as a whole is fine.
So that was a good suggestion.
Leslie and then Jesse.
Well, let Jesse go, because he might be giving a clarifying point.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got it that, you're just not going to be able to put multiple agencies enforcement component into one request. So I think if the end of the day, enforcement of both sanitation, health / quality of life issues are a priority for you all, then I think you're, whether it be number 3 and 4, whichever way you want to split it, but one is being DSNY, and one being health, if you were going to do that. So there'd be the number 4 would be, you'd have 4 there. And so, yeah. But yeah, it's just the environmental police is a very separate unit. So if we want to talk about, overall DSNY enforcement unit, which writes the tickets for dirty sidewalks, illegal dumping, those types of things, that is one thing. The environmental police unit is an entirely different unit. So I just, we want to be clear on that as well, and which one is more important.
Leslie?
I was going to say exactly what Jesse was saying, but also, which might help David's, I guess, his concerns. So, and Jesse, correct me if I'm wrong, actually. We're talking like these are going to go to big agencies. These are, like I said, this is going to be millions of dollars, right? Of agency money. So when we talk about like maybe Litter Legion or other nonprofits, that's not going to get $1 million, right? I mean, they might throw some discretionary funds there, absolutely. But when we're talking about bigger, like syringe pickups or, DOE after schools, these are, it's kind of our commentary as well. So I would, knowing that in the forefront of our minds, I would actually keep it what you have, kind of what you have here, Kit, that you were working on a little bit. And I actually wouldn't even mind, throwing in graffiti free up the, quality of life stuff that people see every day that's really affecting us. And because those are things that are what they call low hanging fruit sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. So quality of life, trash pickup, and this is, anyway, 2 cents thrown in.
Maria, is your hand still up from last time? Zoom's playing tricks on you.
Sorry, I'm having trouble here.
All right.
I lowered her hand. Maria, I lowered your hand.
All right. So we're pretty far away from consensus, is my sense. I think the best path forward is probably to actually have folks vote and see what is the clear top one in terms of items related to DSNY. And then Jesse, are any of these items related to the Department of Health beyond rodent enforcement, or is that the only one?
At a very quick look, no, it's the only one.
Okay, so I think we can say that's our number 4. So I recognize that this is not necessarily going to be easy, or at least easy for everyone, but take a second and look at the items that are highlighted in yellow.
Look on the.
I'll read them out, and then we're going to go down the faces that I can see, and you have to tell me what's your top one, and I'll tally the votes that each of these gets. So we are choosing between increased funding for sanitation enforcement, specifically supervisors to accompany the trucks, reinstating curbside organics collection in our district, funding for graffiti-free NYC, or funding for the Litter Legion nonprofit. If you had to pick one, which one would you pick? And I will try to tally them as we go. So up first, in the order that Zoom has given to me, Alan, what's your number 1?
Increase residential trash pickup in problem areas.
Did I highlight that one? I did not, but I will highlight it now.
Are we talking about the street life or we're going back up to expense? Which one are you doing? I'm sorry.
We're talking about the street life expense items.
Right.
And I'm
Increase
asking
Yeah,
everyone to give me their number one, because that's what will go in our 3 spot.
right. Increase residential trash pickup in problem areas.
All right. Aurora, you are next.
Increase residential. Well, no, actually, I was curbside organic collection in our district.
Thank you. Blake, you're up.
The residential trash pickup.
Charlie?
I vote for enforcement, but more broadly than just the supervisors and the trucks, meaning like illegal dumping and just general problem areas. I don't know if that's an option.
Yeah, we could potentially expand the language there if that's the one that we select. Thank you. David?
Oh, wow. I'm deciding between Charlie and the increased trash pickup. I guess I'll go with what Charlie says with when we vote on it, then we can just go into the go into more detail for the enforcement. But if we decide the other way, then my
Just one. You got to pick one.
All right, but I'll go with what Charlie said.
Thank you. Josephine?
Residential trash pickup.
Thank you. Katie?
Sanitation enforcement.
Thank you. Leslie?
You know, I was looking for you, Kit, what organics was. Jesse, do you have what organics was for WPE? Because it might be I know it's our top 3, one of our top requests. So it's going to be up there anyway. But if you want me to revote, do another vote for that, I don't know. But it would probably be sanitation enforce, the supervisor, or residential, residential trash pickup, Do that one.
Thank you.
But you're welcome.
Maria?
Hold on. Residential trash pickup.
Matt?
Residential trash pickup.
Mercedes?
The enforcement, the sanitation enforcement, going with what Charlie said.
Thank you. Sabrina?
Can I pick, Jesse?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes.
All right, cool. Then increase residential trash pickup.
Wendy, and then I'll vote.
Residential trash pickup.
I didn't even think what I would vote for, but doesn't really matter. Increased residential trash pickup is the clear favorite here. So we'll go with that as our number 3 on the expense side, and we can shift to capital. All right, so
I'm sorry, Kit, just to jump in, just so everybody understands though, like that doesn't mean everything just disappears after that. It'll filter this down in the priority list, and it will be there will be discussed and included tomorrow as well. So,
unless something has a line through the middle of it, like funding for study of public bathrooms, the current thinking is we would include it. These are just the things that we expect to really be prioritized by us, and then hopefully be prioritized by the rest of the board to get a VIP spot. So on the capital side, we wanted to do sanitation in the number 1 spot is what I believe I heard. And there's actually only one item in there, increasing funding to expand the truck fleet. So I'm just going to drop that in. And then the suggestion, which we can chat about, but ideally figure out an answer to in the next 10 minutes, hopefully, was to do education items for number 2 and number 3 under capital. So a lot of options to choose from: security cameras, upgrading Wi-Fi, renovating bathrooms, and then one-off items on 4 different schools. Just to clarify the bathroom piece, Katie, that was helpful that you brought that up. We heard specifically from the New York City Museum School in the follow-up that we did with principals that they wanted funding for their bathroom. But then we also heard from Josephine tonight that there were specific schools on her radar that also would benefit from bathroom upgrades. That's the only reason why Museum School is sort of called out, is they had confirmed that they had asked for that and not yet received funding from it. Alan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah. Expand funding for reliable high-speed Wi-Fi in all schools. The response to that was the community board should contact the responsible agency regarding this request. So I think Jesse suggested the Office of Technology or something. So it's not going to go to DOE, it should go to another agency.
Yeah, I mean, that was our conversation with SCA, that they let us in on that. Basically, it's the Department of Information and Technology and Telecommunications is the actual agency that manages the DOE's Wi-Fi infrastructure. So we will direct it to the.
That could still be a priority, but just has to get shifted to a different agency.
We'll do that.
Katie, did you want to add in?
I was just going to say, if we need a proposal to shoot at, I would suggest that we have number 1 be for education. So I guess it's number 2 and 3. I would have, if number 1 is sanitation, I would have number 2 be Wi-Fi and number 3 be the security cameras. And then maybe number 4 or something be the funding for the bathroom renovations.
How do folks feel about that? That's very similar to what I was going to say, just not as well put. Clarify, Katie said it better than I would have, not the other way around. Mercedes, I see you're raising your hand, and Jesse, I don't know if your hand is still raised, but we can definitely go back to you.
Yeah, it's still, I'm re-raising.
Cool. We'll go Mercedes, then Jesse, then Josephine.
I would agree with Katie. I think that order is good.
Jesse?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure. I'll just say making the fleet thing number 1 for desanitation. Basically a truck isn't worth anything unless it's got staff to drive it and to do it. So, I know we are making, I think, the residential trash item number 3, I think, in the expense. But I think we kind of focus it on problem areas. And I'll just say, in my knowledge of how DSNY works, it just doesn't work that way. And so if we're going to make the number 1 capital request out of this committee be more trucks, we have to kind of partner it with more staff to run those trucks. And so unless we're talking about a specific type of truck, which I think the language does allude to in the broader language as the reason why we're requesting it is kind of a more green and environmentally friendly fleet. But I guess, again, in my opinion, those are both like citywide 5-borough, capital fleet things. And my understanding of how sanitation works is that if we're talking about problem areas, it's a kind of a very unique situation. So I guess what I'm trying to say all in all is that if we're going to make our capital, I think we should go with our capital being something other than the fleet, but that's my opinion. And I think if we're pushing for upgrading Wi-Fi or bathrooms or something like that, we're seeing progress on that. And so that's what I'll say about that.
Josephine?
So, okay, well, I mean, I agree to keep the sanitation number one, but for the education, I mean, under capital, I guess for the, I would agree for the upgrade for Wi-Fi. I don't want people to feel that there is no Wi-Fi. Of course, all these schools have Wi-Fi, but just keeping it upgraded is an ongoing issue. But for the cameras, I'm wondering, would the expense include maintenance on the cameras and storage for all the video that's being taken? Because I remember when my child was actually at 212, the principal had put up a camera, but there was no funding to like keep the thing going. Like somebody has to monitor this thing. There's lots that goes beyond just putting the camera up. So I guess if the DOE or the school construction authority is already starting to implement cameras in the high schools, which I think is where it's most needed, then I would stick to the bathrooms. But I do have a question first on the cameras. Does that include maintenance, or is that just installation and then they're gone?
I can try to answer that. And Jesse and Alan, if you have different memory of our conversation with SCA, please chime in. I think they're mostly focused on installation. My memory of how surveillance systems work as a former principal is typically the data storage is only for a fixed period of time, because otherwise you're just generating so much footage, and there are pricing concerns and also privacy concerns around that. But I don't think that the SCA, if we ask them for more money for security cameras, is thinking about the considerations that you lifted up, Josephine.
Yeah, okay, so then my choice would be the second education on that would be the bathrooms.
Alan and then Sabrina.
So I would think that any kind of installation would have to come with some sort of maintenance contract or something with the company that's providing it. I would guess, can't just put it in and walk away from it. So perhaps the funding for an installation also comes with funding for future repairs, maybe, or maybe that's something you include in the language for the request. But I want to get back to what Jesse was speaking about, the trucks. Maybe we should be really asking for, and it's probably the expense issue, is for a study. You're going to ask them for more trucks, problem areas, and you probably get a response back. This needs further study. Funds are unavailable at this time, blah, 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 something like that. But then there needs to be some follow-up. Have you done the study? When you're going to do the study? What have you found from the study? So it is follow-up that we would need to do. But I think we need to have sanitation on record somehow that we've studied these areas. Maybe I don't even know if they would do that. That's a whole different thing. But maybe we should be asking for a study first about what areas need to be serviced more often, something like that, rather than just asking them for more trucks and more personnel. I don't know.
Move it over to the expense side, right?
Yeah. I mean, you can probably still ask for more trucks and more personnel in the general sense for pickup, but maybe we should be asking really for some sort of a study about what's going on in our district. Forget about the rest of the city. We just talk about our district. So that should not be, a year, it shouldn't take years to get that off the ground, right? Just a thought.
Sabrina?
Actually, fun fact, everything that is technological comes with expense part. So let's say we Scooby, sorry, my dog. Just like Josephine was saying, like if you install those cameras, they have to be have some expense part for the maintenance of it. The capital, it's like the part of the installment, but then if somebody's watching those cameras or it's working on those cameras, it comes with expense. So anything that is technological usually requires capital and expense. So yeah, to answer your question, to follow up with what you were saying. Sorry.
Mercedes, it looks like your hand is still raised. Is that up from last time, or was there more that you wanted to add?
I think I forgot to lower it. Sorry.
Okay. So let me try and say back what I think that I heard. We seem to be pretty agreed that upgrading Wi-Fi is worth prioritizing again, which was one thing that the superintendent definitely said pretty clearly to us. We seem to be agreed that bathroom renovations are a priority. We have questions about security cameras. We have questions about whether it makes sense to make our number one capital ask the expansion of the truck fleet, or if it even makes sense to include that at all. So let me put something up for folks to react to, which is making funding to upgrade Wi-Fi. Jesse, please remind me, what is the name of the agency that would actually go to?
That is the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications. I might have switched the last two T's, but it's Do It.
Do it.
Cool. And the number two being funding to renovate bathrooms. We heard directly from the museum school, but Josephine, if you would email me and Alan and Jesse the other schools that are on your radar, we can sort of do a specific schools list, starting with museum and adding and building that out.
Sure.
And this is where we can sort of go in a variety of directions. We can scrap pushing for expanding the truck fleet because we have questions about how much is that likely to happen and how effective would it be if it does, given the way that DSNY operates at like a city level. And we can pull in a third capital request from education. We didn't have any capital requests from the arts, so that's not an option. Or we could rethink the wording around the truck fleet piece. Sabrina, you have your hand raised.
Just a friendly amendment. It's no longer Do It. It's called OTI, Office of Technology and Innovation. It recently changed.
Office of, say that one more time.
Office of Technology and Innovation. Scooby, sorry. OTI, yes.
Rebranding. Yeah.
Yes, sir. It's the new mayor. Change it.
Oh, good.
So do you want to?
Can we still blame them for the stuff that they've never done with the 311 service and all of that stuff, or you have to start all over again? Just a comment.
I see Jesse's hand and then Katie's hand.
Oh, I was just going to quickly say, I think that you can reword the truck thing. I think I wasn't in any way implying that it shouldn't be included. I just think in terms of the priority list of what we can be getting for our district in progress. So we shouldn't lose it. But I think what you have right now makes sense.
Katie?
I was just going to say, I really like what you have for number one and number two. And I actually think, we were talking earlier about trying to have something that's like, really sort of a pretty easy get. And I don't think our number 3 is an easy get by any stretch. And I think we need a lot more information about it. And I would actually suggest adding a different one from education that we've been asking for before, whether it's the sign for PS 111 or I'm sorry, PS 11 or the new bleachers. Just something that we've been asking for a while, and that might that we might be able to get.
I see Sabrina's hand up, and that seems to be the first one, but I'm wondering if that one's still up. Josephine and then Alan.
It's a mistake.
I agree with adding, I guess taking out that fleet, because it does seem like, I don't know, it just seems like it's never going to happen. But if we were to do a third education, I like going back down to the list, and perhaps this library could be something. Yeah. Or the gym floor, either one. But I like the idea of revisiting this list for a lower hanging fruit.
Alan's hand is up, and then I have some quick thoughts as well.
Yeah. We did ask for a capital budget to allow for the purchase of additional electric power collection trucks. So we have been asking them for increase in trucks. Due to fiscal constraints, availability of funds is uncertain. So, again, maybe this whole truck idea, funding for this request cannot be determined at this time. So that was the answer we got last year on request for trucks.
I'll just jump in quickly, and then we can go to Leslie. I agree with Josephine. When I look at these other capital requests, the one that resonates the most with me is a new library at the business of Sports High School for a couple reasons. Number one, I think I see like the most clear benefit to students, like outcomes and experiences from a library compared to bleachers and gym floor and a new sign. Not that those things aren't also valuable and important, but also thinking about expanding our engagement. We've had, I think, some ongoing dialogue with PS11, some ongoing dialogue with environmental studies. It would be nice to support a school that, in my memory, we have not yet prioritized in our district. So I think there's a lot of reasons to prioritize that one over the other ones. Leslie?
I'm sorry, Kate, I'm just jotting down a few notes. This is just for clarification. Where was the syringe, the syringe collection thing? Did we make I know people said that was, is that
It'll be included in the things that we request, but it's not going to be in the top 4 expense requests that we put forward.
Okay.
Any other folks want to jump in and comment on what Josephine suggested and I wholeheartedly agree with? Got a thumbs up from Katie. Charlie, go ahead.
Remind me, we took the cameras off because we were worried about ongoing expenses associated with them. I just bring it up because it seemed like multiple schools requested.
Yeah, it's a good question. Both, yeah, I think mainly just the questions around, is pushing for installation sufficient if we're not accounting for the ongoing expenses, was the driver there.
I mean, I don't know much about it. It seems like if it's a camera system with the built-in DVR, it's a matter of a principal or someone having to review it if there's an incident. Otherwise, I would think it runs itself, but that's only my knowledge of the cameras in my condo building, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I think I'm not a security expert, but there's also the belief that like the existence of working cameras acts as a deterrent to a certain degree. So just having them can be helpful in ways that are difficult to quantify. Leslie, you raised your hand again.
Yeah, I think that was a priority of ours last year, a high priority. I don't know, and I think we saw some movement on it. At least that's what the superintendent said. So I don't know what would be the reasoning to push it down if we're seeing movement on it and other schools still need it. It seems like it should be kept in the priority where it was at, or massaged a little bit. But I don't think that this committee or our board should necessarily be worried about, their next steps. We have to put forward what's a priority for us and what we think our residents and our district needs. Whether it can be done, whatever the back channels are to funding it or what needs to be done. I don't know if that should, maybe it should be a factor into how we think, but I don't think it should really be any determining factor. If we need it and we want it, then we should ask for it. I would think, and not kind of outsmart ourselves on it a little bit.
Yeah, keep it simple.
Yeah, I think so. I think it might be like, putting too many factors in when if we need it, ask for it.
Yeah.
And it was one of the three things that the superintendent said was on his list. So maybe it makes sense to have
That's a good point. I forgot about that. Thank you.
these three that we've heard from the community, specifically from principals at different points, and then heard again from the superintendent recently, are his three top. And then this one school specific one, which I personally am in favor of, goes down to the fourth spot. Charlie, are you raising your hand to make another comment? Okay, let's go back to Josephine.
If everyone wants to leave the cameras there, I'm fine with that, but I just wanted to say that I think Jesse was the one who brought up to Kelly, the superintendent, what we had from last year. So he didn't necessarily, put forth those ideas, but he said that was fine to leave on. Yeah, it's fine. Could someone is there an update on elementary schools and the cameras, or did somebody get one, or what's happening with that?
Yeah.
Alan has that. Okay.
Supposedly PS33 is in a design phase and PS111 is in pre-scope phase. So I guess one is further along than the other. I think pre-scope and then design is probably a little further down the road. But maybe we could just shoot a note to the principals and ask them what's really going on there.
Okay, so you're saying that then have all the schools technically been covered or coming down the wire, or were just those two schools approved?
Yeah, the only information we've gotten from SCA were those two schools.
Okay, I'm just wondering how they chose those two.
I can try to answer that. My impression from what SCA shared with us is it's not necessarily up to them. There's a process that may be run, Jesse, you can correct me if I'm wrong, by the school safety officers to sort of prioritize across all the schools what are the ones that are highest on the list for security camera installation based on a number of factors. Based on those factors and the way they weight it, typically high schools get much more success getting installation than elementary schools, but there are also some elementary schools like PS33 that have been prioritized. And so they showed us a list of what was sort of at various stages of the pipeline, but they made it sound like this is a list that they get from folks on security, the sort of school safety officer, NYPD side, as opposed to they get to pick which ones they install. Is that more or less right, Jesse?
Yeah, no, and I would just say that we have just been focusing on the schools that are on our list that originally. So we've really been chasing down those four. I think there's 3 or 4 schools, Alan, that we highlighted from the school, about the security cameras. So we haven't been necessarily asking why other schools specifically in our district haven't got them yet. So that's something we can certainly follow up on later, but that's another reason why those particular schools, we have information on those schools, and we might not have information on all of them.
Okay, so then let me just ask this, Jesse, then. So if we do not include the cameras under capital, does that mean that the SCA is no longer going to look at the schools that don't have them yet, like 212 and 11 and
Well, I can't-
51? Is that how
yeah,
that works, or?
No, I can't speak to that. I mean, we would be, our request came from a conversation that we had, I think maybe if someone on the committee can remember, I think almost literally 3 years ago. This was pre-COVID, if memory serves, when we actually met in person, I believe, with you all met in person with the then superintendent, with a handful of principals who had highlighted this as an issue. And then a number of those principals from those schools said, yes, that's something that's a priority to us. So, you know, I can't speak to each of the schools in our districts, you know, pipeline and where they are about security cameras, or if it's that much of a priority to them. So I think, you know, if we do think overall security is a good idea for, you know, all schools, then I think we should keep it in. And, you know, we should see those wins. We should see the schools that are in the pipeline as wins. And if we wanted to sort of do a broad, again, another broad request saying all the schools in our district should have security cameras, that's what we can do.
Yeah, okay. That's fine. It would be nice to do something for one of the high schools, since we have like 20 high schools in CB4 that are, you know, need lots of different things. And, you know, I'm glad that you guys worked on reaching out to them. But since it is only going to affect one school, the library, and the cameras, or multiple schools, then I would, you know, I'm fine with leaving the cameras.
Alan?
Just to throw a wrench into this whole thing, there's another department. At least I just learned that there's another department you have to deal with in a lot of these renovations and upgrades, and that's the school facilities. So this is a whole nother ball game, and an agency, or part of an agency that we've never dealt with before. So I guess somewhere along the line, maybe we can try to get educated on what they do, and maybe reach out to them at certain points during the course of the year somehow. So I just wanted to bring that up as it's not like you deal with sanitation, you deal with parks, and you deal with the district manager, or you deal with the chief of staff, and he comes to the meeting and blah, 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 and it gets done, right? This DOE is like mind-boggling. It really is.
I think Matt might know something about facilities from the washers and dryers.
I'm sure Matt knows a lot about facilities.
Yes, we've definitely been there before.
Yeah, maybe Matt we should get Matt to give us a seminar one evening or something on Zoom.
Happy to do that. Not tonight.
Not tonight, Matt. No, but, you know, in due
Facilities,
time.
just the very quick facilities are sort of like the on-site folks in the school. So if there's like a chipped tile in a bathroom, school facilities will handle that, not the school construction authority. It's minor improvements within a school.
But this bleacher thing in high school, I could be wrong. The way, I don't have it right in front of me, but the bleacher thing in environmental high school was funded again before. They ran into problems when they tried to get back on track. They needed more money. We still haven't gotten a straight answer on that. But school facilities was mentioned in that, as they're the ones who are coordinating and overseeing this project. So, you know, it's not just like you mentioned, you know, the chip tile and maybe fix the faucet. It seems that they have a bigger role in this whole scheme of things in terms of what gets done in their schools, because I guess these are run by the custodians who are there, who run the school. So, all right, let's continue.
So I think we may be approaching the finish line here. Let me try to recap. What we set out to do was come up with our top requests across street life, education, and the arts in both the expense and the capital categories. We landed on what hopefully folks can see in front of them as the top 4 for each. all the things except for the one or two that are crossed out that are not in these 8 for each for capital expense will be included in what we share with Leslie and the budget folks. But just based on the way the process works, these are the ones that have a fighting chance of really being high on the board's overall list. If there's nothing else that folks want to say, Jesse, do we need sort of like a vote to approve this, or?
You do need a vote, so.
Is anyone willing to make a motion to approve? And is there
Is
a
it, wait, is there
second?
any art stuff? I'm sorry, did I miss arts or is that in there?
None of the art stuff is going to make it into the top 4 in expense and there were no
Gotcha.
capital items, but they'll be included in the overall.
Thanks, Kip. Then I'll make the motion if you need someone to make a motion.
I second.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please either raise your hand or raise your digital hand.
Can we take down the screen just so we can see everybody's hand? Thank you.
Any?
Looks like that is almost everybody. And Sabrina, did you say you're present, not eligible?
Yes.
Cool. So that is item number 2 on our agenda for tonight. Item number 3. Any new business? Alan.
Yes. Getting back to school busing. We were going to write a separate letter to the controller requesting some sort of a survey, some sort of a report on the school busing situation and the possibility of maybe looking at putting school busing under DOE. So is that something we still want to do? We could maybe just make it an admin letter, make it simple, and see what response we get from the controller's office. Is that a yes? Do we want to do that?
Admin
Sure, why
letter,
not?
I would agree to that, yes.
Okay,
Keep
all
it
right.
simple, yes.
Okay.
My question, just quickly, and I'm for it, is we had somebody who spoke about with the school buses to have, I'm going to use the old fashioned term, I can't remember the modern term that's used, to have the matrons on the buses. There's this modern word, I can't, which is gender neutral, like on the buses. Is that going to be part of our letter? Because that, you know, I think that's important, especially for the handicapped kids or special ed kids, but even for the kids to have
we
a
can
chaperone.
we could maybe put some wording in terms of what we're looking for in terms of a report, maybe something like that we can do. But my question, Jesse, does this need to go to exec if you do administrative, or
no? Well, so admin letters need to be. I mean, and again, I need to go look back at the letter that we had written originally as a result of the conversations we had at the committee. But, you know, typically admin letters are either restating something that we've already said as a board, or asking questions for clarity's sake to gather more information to be able to build a consensus on a point of view. So I think if you're asking questions to the controller's office to do an audit, normally what their controller does is an audit and a report. That is something you can ask for, and you're saying, you know, and these are the questions we would want to know about. But if we're kind of making a new statement, that should not be in an admin letter. That should kind of be back at the committee.
Gotcha. All right. Okay. All right.
Next month, Alan.
Well, maybe we could still get it out as an admin letter.
Yeah, that does not require exec. I can have that reviewed by Jeffrey, as long as, again, it's basically setting the stage for information.
Okay. So you'll let us know, please, which way we have to go. Which way to.
You guys decide right now. You guys can say you want to do an admin letter and gather more information. And you're going to, I'm assuming you're raising it, so you'll be drafting it. And we'll, you know, you and Kit will review it, and then it'll go to Jeffrey, and we'll send it to
has to go to Josephine first also.
Whoever you like, whoever wants to be on the team to review it.
Okay, all right, so then we could just go ahead, because, I thought you said you had to check if it was appropriate to do it that way, depending on what we wrote before.
Well, again, matters what you put in the letter. So
Right.
I'll review it as
Right.
well. And if you put something new and different in the letter, I will tell you guys that's not where, you're making a statement, not a question on.
Okay. All right.
But if you're reiterating something you've already written about previously, that is fine.
Okay. Cool.
We do need to vote on it, right, Jesse?
Yeah, yes, that would be great. That'd be
And
lovely.
Alan, I don't think can make the motion himself. So if someone could make the motion and someone else could second it, we can vote.
I make the motion.
A second.
All in favor? Maria? Would you be able to come off mute and let us know if you're in favor, opposed, present, not eligible, or abstaining? I'm going to chalk that up as an abstention. Any other new business on this fine night? All right, before anybody changes their mind, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Thanks.
Thank you, everybody. I think we got to a good